When my daughter told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas, I smiled, got in my car, and drove home. 2 days later, I had 42 missed calls. What she didn't know was that I'd been hiding a secret that would change everything forever. Let me tell you this story, because it runs much deeper than you might think. And what happened in those weeks would reshape not just our relationship, but my entire understanding of what it means to be a father, a man, and someone worthy of love. For 20 years, I sacrificed everything for my family. I worked 60 hours a week, sometimes 70, to give my daughter Emily the best life possible. I paid for her $40,000 a year college tuition without blinking. I covered her apartment rent in the city during those 4 years. I paid for her study abroad semester in Barcelona. Every expense, every dream, every whim, I made it happen. It was a Friday in December when Emily called. The moment I saw her name on my screen, I felt something in my chest, an intuition perhaps. Her voice sounded different when I answered, cold, distant, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "Dad, I need to talk to you about Christmas." My heart started racing. For 25 years, we'd never spent a Christmas apart. It was our most sacred tradition. Ever since she was 3 years old, we'd had this ritual. We'd wake up early, make hot chocolate together, open presents by the fireplace. Even after her mother died 8 years ago, we kept the tradition alive, perhaps even more fiercely, because it was all we had left of those perfect family moments. "We've decided it would be better if you didn't come this year." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I actually had to pull over to the side of the road because my hands started shaking. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to sound like the world was collapsing around me. "That's right, Dad. Marcus thinks you meddle too much in our lives, and I agree." Marcus was her husband of 3 years, a financial analyst who I'd never quite connected with, though I'd tried. I'd helped them with the down payment on their house. I'd given them $20,000 as a wedding gift. I stayed silent for a few seconds, letting her words sink in, each one leaving a mark. "Meddling, Emily?" I asked, and I could hear the hurt creeping into my voice despite my best efforts. "Always giving unsolicited advice, always questioning our financial decisions," she replied, her tone defensive now, almost angry. "Every time we see you, it's a lecture about saving more, investing better, planning ahead. Marcus and I are tired of it. We need space." Each accusation felt like a knife wound. Everything I did came from love, from wanting to protect her from the mistakes I'd made, from the hard lessons I'd learned building my business from nothing. But my love was being seen as interference, as control, as something suffocating rather than supportive. "I understand," I finally said, keeping my voice steady even though I felt like I was breaking inside. "If that's what you both want, I'll respect it." She seemed surprised by my calm response. "Really? You're not going to argue? You're not going to tell me I'm being ungrateful?" There it was, that word she expected me to use but never had. "No, sweetheart, you're an adult. You have the right to set boundaries." There was an uncomfortable silence that stretched for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds. "Okay then, talk to you later, Dad." And she hung up, just like that. 25 years of devotion dismissed in a 5-minute phone call. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before starting the engine. Cars passed by, people going about their Friday evening plans, completely unaware that my world had just shifted on its axis. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I just smiled. A strange, liberating smile, because in that moment I made a decision I'd been considering for 6 months. What Emily didn't know was that I was already in the process of selling my business. What she didn't know was that her rejection, painful as it was, had just made my decision infinitely easier. When I got home to my empty 4-bedroom house that suddenly felt too large, too quiet, too full of memories, I called Dr. Harrison, my lawyer for 15 years. "David," I said when he answered, "I want to accelerate everything." There was a pause on the other end. "Michael, are you sure? Once we sign on Monday, there's no going back. This is 30 years of your life we're talking about." "I've never been more certain about anything in my life," I replied, and I meant it. The buyers, a private equity firm from Boston, were just waiting for my final decision. They'd been patient, professional, offering me a generous price. They saw the value in what I'd built, even if my own daughter couldn't see the value in me. You see, for years I'd been the family bank. When Emily needed money for college, I paid without hesitation. Trip to Europe with her friends after graduation, I financed it, $3,500. Car broke down during her junior year, I bought her a new Honda Civic, $19,000. Wedding to Marcus, I paid for a $150,000 celebration at the Peninsula Hotel because she wanted everything perfect. I'd always been the provider, the solver of problems, the safety net that caught every fall. But now I was being rejected, cast aside like a worn-out coat that no longer fit the aesthetic of her new life. Saturday and Sunday passed in strange calmness. I did my routine with an almost meditative quality. Gym at 6 in the morning, where I ran 5 miles on the treadmill and thought about nothing but my breathing. Lunch at the diner on 5th Street, where I'd been eating for 20 years. Reading in the afternoon, books I'd been meaning to get to, classics I'd never had time for when I was building the business. I didn't call Emily, didn't send a text, didn't check her social media to see what she was doing. I kept my word about giving her space, but inside I was mentally finalizing all the details of my radical change, my escape plan, my rebirth. On Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, I walked into Dr. Harrison's office downtown. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the same city where I'd built everything from scratch. I signed the papers with a steady hand, 32 pages of legal documents that transferred ownership of my company, Michael's Construction Solutions, to people I'd never work with again. I sold my company for $8 million. 30 years of work, of sacrifice, of missing Emily's school plays and soccer games, of working weekends and holidays, all transformed into a number in an account. But it wasn't about money, it was about freedom. At 60 years old, I was starting my life over, and that thought terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. For the first time in 30 years, I was free, truly free, without employees depending on me, without urgent decisions keeping me up at night, without constant pressure to bid on the next project, to beat the competition, to prove I was still relevant. I sat in my armchair when I got home and remained in silence for an hour, just breathing, just being. It was liberating in a way I hadn't experienced since I was a young man, before responsibilities, before fatherhood, before I became someone defined entirely by what I could provide for others. Now came the most important part, discovering who I really was beneath all those layers of obligation. On Tuesday, I woke up with mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. The morning light came through my bedroom window differently somehow, softer, more hopeful. I did something unthinkable. I went online and bought a ticket to Ireland for the following month, January 15th. One way. 15 years ago, I promised my wife Catherine we'd visit the land of our ancestors, that we'd walk the same streets her grandmother had walked before immigrating to America in 1947. I'd see the cliffs of Moher that she dreamed of visiting, that she'd shown me pictures of countless times, making me promise we'd go someday. Someday never came for her. She died of breast cancer 8 years ago, and I'd been so consumed with work and raising Emily alone that I'd never made that trip. But I would make it now, for her, for me, for the life we should have lived. I also made another decision that defined who I really was beneath the businessman exterior. I called 3 charitable organizations that afternoon. St. Joseph's Senior Home, where my mother had spent her final years. Children's Cancer Foundation, because watching kids fight that disease while caring for Catherine had broken something in me that needed mending. City Hospital, where the staff had treated my wife with such dignity and compassion. To each, I would donate $1 million, $3 million total. It was about values, about leaving a mark that mattered more than buildings and contracts. It was about being the kind of man my wife had believed I was, even when I'd been too busy to show it. On Wednesday, I started organizing my move with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I contacted a real estate agent and put the house up for sale. The same house where Emily had grown up, where Catherine and I had brought her home from the hospital, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday dinners. I separated furniture to donate and sell. The leather couch that cost $4,000, the dining room table that sat 12 people for dinner parties we never hosted, the expensive artwork that was supposed to make me look sophisticated. The luxury car, a Mercedes S-Class that I'd bought to prove something to myself, would also be sold. I wanted to start simple in Ireland, just with the essentials, with things that had meaning rather than price tags. I wanted to be just Michael, not Michael the successful businessman, not Michael the provider, not Michael the father who wasn't good enough. Just Michael, whoever that turned out to be. The hardest part was going through the photos. I found them in boxes in the attic. Years and years of memories carefully preserved by Catherine. 25 years of memories with Emily. First day of kindergarten, her tiny hand gripping her Barbie. Lunchbox. Elementary school graduations, where she'd been so proud of her certificates. Middle school awkwardness that made me ache with protective love. High school prom, where she'd looked so grown up in that blue dress. College graduation, where she'd thanked me in her speech, making me cry in front of hundreds of people. Wedding day, where I'd walked her down the aisle and whispered, "Your mother would be so proud." I saw a proud father in those photos, but also a man who'd lost himself along the way, who'd become so focused on providing that he'd forgotten to just be present. I separated the special ones to take with me, maybe 50 photos that captured real moments rather than posed smiles, and organized the rest to leave for Emily in a box marked, "For you whenever you're ready." On Thursday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked through the city without hurry, without purpose, without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I visited places from my childhood, streets that had changed but still held echoes of who I used to be. The elementary school, where I'd learned to read, now renovated but still recognizable. The park where my father had taught me to throw a baseball, now with modern playground equipment, but the same oak trees. I talked with people in the park, strangers who had no idea who I was, no expectations of me. An elderly woman feeding pigeons who told me about her late husband. A young mother, struggling with a stroller, who smiled gratefully when I held the gate open. I had lunch at a small cafe where nobody knew me as the businessman, where I was just another customer ordering a sandwich and coffee. For the first time in decades, I was just Michael, and I knew that was what I wanted, what I'd been missing, what Emily's rejection had accidentally given me permission to find. Friday arrived, a full week since Emily's call. A full week of this strange new existence where I wasn't constantly available, constantly solving problems, constantly being useful. I still hadn't spoken to her. I didn't know if she'd even noticed my absence or if she was too busy enjoying her space from her meddling father. Our communication had always been about what she needed, when she needed it, how quickly I could make it happen. Maybe she was discovering what it was like to live without her father available 24/7, without the safety net she'd taken for granted her entire life. That's when the first sign of change happened. My cell phone rang. Around 3 in the afternoon, I looked at the screen. Marcus. In 3 years of being my son-in-law, he'd never called me directly. Every communication had gone through Emily. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey, Michael, can we talk?" His voice sounded worried, uncertain, nothing like his usual confident tone. "Of course, Marcus. What's going on?" "It's about Emily. She's been acting strange since last week, constantly checking her phone, asking if you've called. Me if I've heard from you." I felt a small surge of satisfaction that I immediately felt guilty about. "I see," I responded calmly, keeping my voice neutral. "She doesn't know I'm calling," he continued, speaking quickly like he needed to get this out before he lost courage. "But I think she misses you. She keeps talking about things you used to do together, places you'd go. Yesterday she drove past your house, called me crying, saying your car wasn't there. I'm worried about her, Michael. I know what we said about Christmas, and maybe I pushed too hard on that. I thought I was standing up for us as a couple, but now I'm not sure I did the right thing." I was surprised by his sincerity, by this crack in the wall that had been built between us. "Marcus, you both said I meddled too much. I'm respecting that boundary. Isn't that what you wanted?" There was a long pause. "Yeah, I guess so. But I didn't think you'd just disappear completely. Emily thought you'd argue, push back, prove us. Wrong. That's what you always do, but you didn't. Maybe I'm tired of always being the one who tries harder," I said quietly. "Maybe it's someone else's turn." "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up. What I felt wasn't anger, not really. It was a mixture of sadness and validation. Sadness because my daughter was suffering, because even with all my faults I'd never wanted to hurt her. But validation because she was finally noticing my absence, finally realizing that I wasn't just a permanent fixture in her life that would always be there no matter how badly she treated me. Sometimes we need to lose something to realize its importance, to understand that people are not infinite resources. Saturday morning, exactly 1 week later, my phone started ringing at 8 o'clock. Emily. I looked at her name on the screen, that photo of her smiling at her wedding, and I let it go to voicemail. My hand hovered over the answer button, years of instinct telling me to pick up, but I didn't. 5 minutes later it rang again. Same name, same decision. It was the beginning of the 42 attempts over the next 2 days. Each ring confirmed my decision, validated my worth, reminded me that I had value beyond what I could provide. The messages came like an avalanche, each one more desperate than the last. "Dad, please call me back. I just want to talk." "Dad, I'm worried about you. Where are you?" "Dad, I'm sorry for everything I said. I didn't mean it." "Dad, I miss you. Please don't do this." "Dad, don't abandon me. I need you." It was fascinating to see how the dynamic had shifted completely. For the first time in years, she was desperately trying to reach me instead of me trying to fit into her busy schedule. On Sunday afternoon, she showed up at my house unannounced. I was sitting in my living room reading when I heard the car pull up. I looked out the window and saw her Honda, the one I'd bought her, the one she'd been so grateful for until it became just another thing she expected. She rang the doorbell, not once but continuously, desperately, for 10 consecutive minutes. The sound echoed through the empty house. I was in the living room. I could see her through the window, could see her visibly distressed, pacing back and forth on my porch, looking at the windows like she could will me into appearing. For a few minutes I thought about opening the door, thought about ending this experiment, this lesson, whatever it was. But then I remembered all the times she'd been too busy for lunch, too busy for a phone call, too busy for the father who'd given her everything. She stayed at the door for 40 minutes, and I timed it, watching the clock on the wall tick by. She shouted my name several times. "Dad, I know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway. I can see the lights on." "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please talk to me." "Dad, I'm afraid I've lost you. Please don't let that be true." Her voice broke on that last one, and I almost gave in, almost opened the door. But I didn't. When she finally left, driving away slowly like she was hoping I'd chase after her, I knew I'd succeeded in something important. She was feeling the fear of losing someone important, the same fear I'd felt when she'd rejected me, when she'd told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas. Sunday night brought the deepest silence I'd ever experienced. Only 3 missed calls after 6 in the evening. Emily had stopped trying, at least for the moment. I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I'd damaged something that couldn't be repaired. But then I remembered all the years I'd chased after her, all the times I'd apologized for things I hadn't done wrong, all the ways I'd made myself smaller to fit into her life. Maybe our relationship needed this complete reset, this breaking down to build back up stronger. On Monday morning at 7, my phone rang. Mrs. Collins, my elderly neighbor who'd lived next door for 15 years. "Michael, there's a young woman here asking about you. Says she's your daughter. She seems very upset. She's saying you sold the company. Is everything all right?" My heart accelerated. Emily had discovered the sale. She'd probably called my office, talked to someone who'd told her. The last secret was revealed, and now she understood this wasn't just about Christmas, wasn't just about giving her space for a week. This was about my entire life changing. "Mrs. Collins, can you tell her I'm traveling and don't know when I'll be back?" It was a white lie, but necessary. I still wasn't ready for the final confrontation, for the conversation that would determine everything. "Are you sure, dear? She looks quite distressed." "I'm sure. Thank you, Mrs. Collins." Emily had discovered the truth, and that changed everything. She understood that my absence was a conscious decision to restart my life, not a temporary punishment or a way to prove a point. This was real. This was permanent, unless something fundamental changed between us. 2 hours later, she was at my door again, this time with Marcus, who looked visibly embarrassed, like he'd been dragged here against his better judgment. I could see in her eyes a mixture of desperation, anger, and fear. The fear was what struck me most, because I'd never seen her afraid like this before. It reminded me of when she was small and had gotten lost in a department store, that same panicked look when she'd finally found me. The time had come for the conversation we'd avoided for years. The conversation that would define whether we'd still be father and daughter, or just 2 people who shared a history and nothing more. I opened the door slowly and saw them standing there. Marcus, with his hands in his pockets, looking at his shoes. Emily, with tears already streaming down her face. They looked like 2 children called to the principal's office. "Dad," Emily said, her voice breaking on the single syllable. "Is it true that you sold the company? Mrs. Collins said you're moving. Is it true? Please tell me it's not true." "It's true," I responded calmly, though my heart was racing. "I signed the papers a week ago. The house goes on the market tomorrow." The tension was palpable. You could feel 25 years of accumulated disappointments, unspoken resentments, and fierce love all pressing down on this single moment. "Why didn't you tell me anything? Why am I finding out from strangers? From your neighbor? From people at your office who barely know me?" she asked, her voice rising, becoming almost hysterical. "Because you made it clear you didn't want my interference in your life," I said quietly. "I thought the feeling would be mutual. Emily, our relationship has always been about your needs, about what you wanted, about me solving your problems. It's never been about who I am, beyond being a provider, beyond being the father with the checkbook." Marcus remained silent, uncomfortable with our conversation, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I almost felt sorry for him. This wasn't his fight, not really, even though he'd helped start it. "For 25 years, I was just the dad who solves problems," I continued, and now my own voice was getting emotional. "The dad who pays for things, who fixes things, who shows up when you need something. But I've spent 60 years on this earth, Emily. I have dreams and fears and desires that have nothing to do with being your father, and I want to discover who Michael is before it's too late, before I die. Having lived only for other people, she started to cry, not delicate tears, but deep, gulping sobs that shook her whole body. And these weren't manipulative tears, weren't tears designed to get her way. They were tears of recognition, of understanding, of grief for something she hadn't known she was losing. "But I love you, Dad," she managed to say between sobs. "I love you so much. I was just stressed with work and the house and Marcus's family always being around. I didn't mean those things I said. I didn't mean you weren't welcome. I just wanted one Christmas without having to explain our decisions to you. And I love you too, sweetheart. I love you more than anything in this world," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. But love doesn't mean being always available to be rejected whenever you're stressed. Love doesn't mean sacrificing every part of myself to make your life easier. True love includes self-dignity, includes respect, includes understanding that both people in the relationship have value. I picked up a letter I'd written, an envelope with her name on it in my careful handwriting. "Here's everything I wanted to tell you over the last few years, but never had the courage to say. Read it when you're ready. Dad, are you really going to Ireland? You're really leaving?" Her voice was small now, childlike. "Are you going to abandon me?" The word abandon hit me hard, because that's what my absence felt like to her. "I'm not abandoning you, Emily. I'm choosing myself for the first time in decades. You're 28 years old. You're married. You have a career and a house and a whole life. It's time for me to build my life too, while I still can. Your mother and I always planned to retire somewhere beautiful, somewhere peaceful. She never got that chance. I'm taking it now. Can I visit you?" she asked suddenly, desperately. "Can I come see you in Ireland?" I paused, considering. "Maybe, someday, when we've both figured some things out." It was the most difficult goodbye, but also the most necessary one I'd ever experienced. 3 weeks passed until my departure. They were 3 weeks of reconstruction, of slowly rebuilding something between us that looked different than before. Emily reached out every day, but I didn't always respond immediately. Sometimes I let hours pass, sometimes a full day. I was teaching her, teaching myself, that availability couldn't be taken for granted. But this time, it was different when we did talk. She asked questions about me, about my dreams for Ireland, about my fears of starting over at 60. She asked about her mother, about our early years together, about who I was before I became her father. She asked about my childhood, my parents, stories I'd never thought to tell because she'd never seemed interested. We met for coffee 3 times in those weeks. Neutral territory, a cafe downtown where neither of us had history. We talked like 2 people getting to know each other, rather than father and daughter with all that weight of history. She told me about her job stress, about feeling inadequate, about worrying she wasn't good enough. I told her about building my business from nothing, about the terror and exhilaration of taking risks. She told me about her fears of having children, of repeating mistakes, of not being as good a parent as I'd been. That one broke my heart in a new way, because I'd never known she felt that pressure. At the airport, she came to see me off. Marcus was with her, and he shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye. "Take care of yourself, Michael, and thank you for everything. I know I didn't say that before." Emily hugged me tight, tighter than she had in years, like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. "Thank you for teaching me that you have value beyond what you can do for me, Dad. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I'm sorry I hurt you. I know, sweetheart. And I'm sorry I couldn't teach you that lesson without hurting you back." "Will you really come back someday?" she asked, pulling back to look at my face like she was memorizing it. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I'll call every week. And you can write to me. Real letters, not emails. Tell me about your life, not what you need from me." She nodded, crying again, but different tears now. Tears of understanding rather than panic. Now, 6 months later, I'm in a small town on the western coast of Ireland, near the cliffs of Moher that Catherine dreamed about. I bought a simple cottage with a view of the green hills that roll down to the sea. It's small, just 2 bedrooms and a tiny kitchen, but it's mine in a way nothing has been mine in decades. The front window looks out over fields where sheep graze, and beyond that, on clear days, I can see the Atlantic Ocean stretching to the horizon. Every evening I pour myself a glass of Irish whiskey and sit in my chair by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in colours that seem impossible. And I talk to Catherine. I tell her about the day, about the neighbours I'm slowly getting to know, about Emily's latest letter. I tell her I'm sorry it took me so long to get here, sorry she never got to see this place she dreamed about. But I think she'd understand why I'm here now, why I needed to lose everything to find myself. Emily writes me long letters every week, real handwritten letters in envelopes with Irish stamps that the postman delivers with a smile. And here's the miraculous part. They're not letters asking for money or help or solutions to problems. They're letters from a daughter who's getting to know her father as a person, as a human being with his own story. She tells me about her work, about a promotion she earned through her own effort. She tells me about her insecurities, about seeing a therapist to work through some things, about her mother's death that she never processed. She tells me about her plans to maybe start a family, but on her own timeline, not because of pressure. She tells me she's learning to be independent in ways she never knew she needed to be. And I write back long letters about my adventures in this country that feels like home, even though I've only been here half a year. I tell her about learning to play chess with my neighbour Patrick, about joining a local hiking group, about taking Irish language classes at the community centre. I tell her about visiting Catherine's grandmother's village, about standing in the church where her family worshipped, about crying in a cemetery reading gravestones with her family name. I tell her I'm learning to paint, something I've never tried before, and I'm terrible at it, but I love it anyway. The relationship has changed completely, transformed into something neither of us knew was possible. We've become friends beyond father and daughter, 2 adults who respect each other, who choose to be in each other's lives rather than being there out of obligation or guilt. She tells me things she never would have before, and I do the same. And the most interesting thing, she's become more independent, more confident. Like my constant availability had been a crutch she didn't know she was leaning on. Without it, she's learned to stand on her own, to trust herself, to make decisions without my approval. Marcus sends occasional emails too, thanking me for the space that's allowed their marriage to grow, to become their own, rather than something performed for my benefit. If you're a father or mother hearing this story, remember this. Being a provider is important, necessary even, but don't lose yourself being only that. Don't become so consumed with giving that you forget you're a person too, with needs and dreams and the right to pursue your own happiness. You have a right to dignity, to respect, to boundaries. You have a right to be seen and valued for who you are, not just what you can give. And if you're a child, even an adult child, remember this. Your parents are people before they're providers. They have their own stories, their own pain, their own dreams that existed before you and will hopefully continue after you've grown. They deserve to be asked about themselves, to be known, to matter beyond what they can do for you. Sometimes 42 missed calls are necessary for us to discover the value of the people in our lives. Sometimes we need to lose someone to understand that they were never ours to keep, that relationships require choice and effort from both sides. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is the permission to miss them, to need them, to realize that love is not infinite if it's only flowing one direction. I'm learning that now, here in this cottage by the sea, with my daughter's letters in a box by my bed, and my wife's memory in the whiskey I drink at sunset. I'm learning that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be, that reinvention is possible at 60, that the greatest adventure might be the one where you finally discover yourself. And every time I watch the sunset over the Atlantic, painting the sky in impossible colors, I smile, because I know that saying no to that Christmas was saying yes to the rest of my life. And that was worth every one of those 42 missed calls.